What if I told you that a single law passed quietly this week could wipe out thousands from your rental income in just 1 year? Sounds dramatic, right? But here's the shocking part. New Zealand landlords are facing the biggest rule shakeup in decades, and many property investors still have no idea what just changed. Overnight approvals, sudden amendments, and policies that look harmless on paper but hit hard in real life are already sending waves of panic through the rental market. Some landlords may lose tax benefits, others could face higher compliance costs, and a few might even be forced to sell earlier than planned. The scariest thing? These rules don't hurt everyone equally. Small and middle-class investors may take the biggest hit. If you own property, plan to invest in New Zealand, or rely on rental income for your future, this is something you cannot ignore. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see how these laws could change the game in 2026 and beyond, and what most people are missing right now.
Number 10. What landlords must do next to protect their investment. With all these new landlord laws now passed, one thing is very clear. Doing nothing is no longer an option. Many property investors fail not because the market crashes, but because they react too late. The rules coming into force in 2026 demand that landlords become more informed, more strategic, and more proactive than ever before. This means carefully reviewing rental agreements, reassessing cash flow under the new tax and compliance pressures, and understanding exactly how each regulation applies to your specific property type. A law that barely affects a large portfolio investor could seriously damage a single property landlord. That gap is where most losses happen. Smart landlords are already stress testing their investments, calculating worst-case scenarios, and adjusting rents legally where possible. Others are exploring property upgrades that improve long-term value while staying compliant with stricter standards. Some investors may even need to rethink their holding strategy, whether that means selling underperforming properties, restructuring ownership, or shifting focus to regions less affected by these changes. The key is planning ahead instead of panicking later. These laws are not temporary. They are designed to reshape the rental market permanently. Most importantly, landlords must stay updated. Regulations can be adjusted, enforcement rules can tighten, and small amendments can create big consequences. Relying on old advice or outdated strategies is risky in this new environment. Property investment in New Zealand is no longer just about buying and waiting. It's about active management and informed decisions. Those who adapt early can still survive and even thrive, while those who ignore the warning signs may struggle to recover. CTA, if you want to stay ahead of these changes, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which law worries you the most. Also, check out our other videos where we break down property trends and survival strategies every landlord should know before 2026 hits.
Number 9. Tighter rules on ending tenancies could lock you in longer than expected. One of the most quietly dangerous changes for property investors in 2026 is the tightening of rules around ending a tenancy. Under the new updates, landlords in New Zealand will face even fewer valid reasons to ask tenants to leave, and the burden of proof will sit heavily on the property owner. This means you can no longer rely on flexibility if your personal or financial situation suddenly changes. Previously, selling a property, renovating, or planning to move back in gave landlords a reasonable pathway to end a tenancy. Now, these reasons come with strict conditions, longer notice periods, and stronger tenant protections. If paperwork is incomplete or timelines are missed by even a small margin, the termination can be challenged and overturned by the tenancy tribunal. What makes this law especially risky is the financial pressure it creates. Investors may be forced to hold on to underperforming properties longer than planned, even when interest rates rise or cash flow turns negative. In some cases, landlords may need to pay compensation if a termination is ruled unlawful, adding another unexpected cost. This law also reduces strategic control. Investors who rely on short to medium-term planning, such as buying, improving, and reselling, may find their timelines completely disrupted. The market becomes less agile, and mistakes become more expensive. In simple terms, this change shifts power further away from property owners and demands perfect compliance at all times. For investors who value flexibility and exit options, this law could quietly become one of the most painful surprises of 2026.
Number 8. Mandatory healthy home re-inspections will increase ongoing costs. Another major change that could quietly eat into landlord profits is the introduction of mandatory healthy homes re-inspections. Under the new rules, meeting the healthy home standards once is no longer enough.
Properties will now be subject to periodic rechecks, even if nothing has changed since the last inspection. For many investors, this creates a never-ending compliance loop. On paper, the idea sounds reasonable, ensuring rental homes stay warm, dry, and safe. But in reality, these re-inspections come with extra fees, tighter tolerances, and higher risk of failure. Small issues that were previously overlooked, such as minor insulation gaps, aging heat pumps, or slight ventilation underperformance, can now trigger mandatory upgrades. The real challenge is that homes naturally age. A heat pump that met the standard 3 years ago may now be considered inefficient. Insulation can shift, moisture barriers can wear down. Landlords may find themselves forced to upgrade perfectly functional systems simply to meet updated interpretations of the rules. For investors with older properties, the risk is even higher. Re-inspections may flag issues that require structural changes, not just surface fixes. These upgrades can cost thousands of dollars, and failure to act quickly could result in fines or restrictions on renting the property. What makes this law especially frustrating is the lack of control. Even responsible landlords who maintain their properties well can still be penalized due to changing benchmarks or stricter enforcement. Budgeting becomes harder, cash flow becomes less predictable, and long-term returns are harder to calculate. In short, this law turns compliance into an ongoing expense instead of a one-time requirement, adding financial pressure that many investors did not factor into their original property strategy.
Number 7. Stricter rules around rent increases will limit income growth. One of the most impactful changes for property investors is the introduction of stricter controls on rent increases. While rent regulation already exists, the new rules significantly narrow when, how, and how often landlords can raise rent. For many investors, this directly threatens long-term income growth, especially during periods of rising costs and inflation. Under the updated framework, rent increases are more tightly linked to market justification and timing restrictions. Even if mortgage rates, insurance premiums, council rates, or maintenance costs rise sharply, landlords may not be allowed to adjust rent accordingly. This creates a growing gap between operating expenses and rental income, slowly squeezing profit margins. Another issue is the increased scrutiny landlords face when raising rent. Tenants now have stronger rights to challenge increases they believe are unfair. This can lead to disputes, delays, or forced rollbacks, even when the increase reflects genuine cost pressures. The process becomes more stressful and time-consuming, particularly for landlords managing multiple properties. For long-term investors, this law reduces one of the key benefits of property ownership, the ability to grow rental income over time. Fixed or limited rent increases make it harder to plan for future expenses, reinvest in property improvements, or absorb unexpected financial shocks. Smaller landlords are likely to feel the impact most. Unlike large-scale investors, they often rely on rental income to cover mortgages or supplement household earnings. When rent growth is capped but costs continue to rise, many may be forced to dip into personal savings or reconsider whether holding the property is still viable. Ultimately, these stricter rent increase rules shift more financial risk on landlords, limiting flexibility and reducing the attractiveness of property investment as a stable, inflation-resistant income source.
Number 6. Higher property standards will increase compliance costs. Another major change that could seriously impact landlords is the push toward higher mandatory property standards. While improving housing quality sounds positive on the surface, these new requirements place a heavier financial and compliance burden on property investors, especially those with older homes. Under the updated rules, landlords may be required to meet stricter benchmarks for insulation, heating, ventilation, moisture control, and overall safety. Properties that were previously considered compliant may now fall short, forcing owners to carry out upgrades sooner than expected. These upgrades are often expensive, time-consuming, and unavoidable, regardless of the landlord's financial situation. What makes this more challenging is that compliance is no longer flexible. Missing deadlines or failing inspections can result in fines, legal action, or restrictions on renting out the property. For landlords with multiple properties, the cumulative cost of bringing each one up to standard can quickly escalate into tens of thousands of dollars. Older investment properties are hit the hardest. Homes built decades ago often require significant structural changes to meet modern standards. In some cases, landlords may find that the cost of upgrades outweighs the property's rental return, turning what was once a solid investment into a financial liability. There's also the issue of ongoing monitoring. Landlords are expected to prove compliance, maintain detailed records, and respond promptly to tenant complaints related to property conditions. This adds administrative pressure and increases the risk of unintentional noncompliance. While better housing quality benefits tenants, these higher standards significantly raise the cost of doing business for landlords. When combined with limits on rent increases and rising interest rates, this law further compresses margins and makes property investment in 2026 far less forgiving than it used to be.
Number 5. Shorter tenancy termination windows favor tenants. One of the most controversial changes landlords are facing is the introduction of shorter and more restrictive tenancy termination rules. Under these updated laws, landlords have far fewer valid reasons to end a tenancy, and even when a reason is allowed, the notice periods are longer and more complex than before. This dramatically shifts control toward tenants and reduces flexibility for property owners. Previously, landlords could end a tenancy for reasons such as future sale, renovations, or a change in personal circumstances with reasonable notice. Now, many of those options are either removed, delayed, or buried under strict conditions. In some cases, landlords must prove intent with documentation, timelines, and follow-up actions, creating legal risk if plans change. This becomes especially problematic when dealing with problem tenants. Even if rent is paid on time, ongoing issues like repeated complaints, poor property care, or strained neighbor relationships may not meet the legal threshold for termination. As a result, landlords can feel trapped in long-term tenancies with little ability to regain control of their own asset. Another hidden risk is opportunity cost. If market conditions improve, or a landlord wants to repurpose, renovate, or sell the property quickly, these shortened termination windows can cause costly delays. Missed selling opportunities or forced extensions of low-rent tenancies can directly reduce long-term returns. There is also increased legal exposure. Any mistake in notice wording, timing, or justification can result in tribunal disputes, fines, or compensation claims. For self-managing landlords, navigating these rules without professional help becomes increasingly risky. While these changes aim to provide tenants with stability, they significantly limit landlord autonomy, increase stress, and reduce strategic flexibility. For investors planning ahead to 2026, this law makes it clear that property ownership now comes with less control and more legal responsibility than ever before.
Number 4. Higher compliance costs for health, safety, and habitability. Another major shift hitting landlords hard is the rise in mandatory health, safety, and habitability standards. While safe housing is essential, the latest regulations significantly raise the compliance bar, forcing landlords to invest more money up front and on an ongoing basis just to keep their properties legally rentable. Under the updated rules, rental homes must now meet stricter minimum standards covering insulation, ventilation, heating efficiency, moisture control, and general living conditions. Older properties are especially affected, as many were built long before these requirements existed. Landlords may be required to install new heating systems, upgrade insulation, improve airflow, or replace aging fixtures, even if the property has never had issues before. What makes this more challenging is that compliance is no longer a one-time effort. Regular inspections, updated documentation, and proof of ongoing maintenance are now essential. If standards evolve again, landlords may need to reinvest repeatedly. Failing to meet even a single requirement can lead to hefty fines, forced remediation, or tenancy tribunal action. There is also less flexibility in timing repairs. Issues that were once considered minor or cosmetic can now be classified as habitability problems, meaning landlords must act immediately, often at premium contractor rates. Delays due to parts, labor shortages, or cost constraints are rarely accepted as valid excuses. These higher standards also increase insurance and management costs, as professionals are often needed to ensure everything meets legal requirements. For smaller investors, these expenses can quickly eat into rental income and long-term returns. While the intention is to improve living conditions for tenants, the financial reality is clear. Landlords are being asked to shoulder significantly higher compliance costs, turning what once was passive income into a far more hands-on and expensive responsibility.
Number 3. Stricter background checks limit tenant options. A key change that is reshaping the rental landscape in New Zealand is the introduction of stricter tenant background checks. While aimed at protecting tenants and ensuring safety, these rules place additional burdens on landlords, limiting their flexibility and making it harder to secure reliable tenants quickly. Under the new regulations, landlords are now required to conduct comprehensive screenings, including income verification, rental history checks, and in some cases, detailed credit and criminal background reports. Tenants also have the right to contest findings or request additional verification, which can delay the approval process and increase administrative work for landlords. For landlords managing multiple properties, this means a significant increase in time and effort spent on tenant selection.
Previously, a simple rental application and references might have sufficed, but now each applicant may require multiple forms of documentation and verification. Failing to comply with these checks can result in legal challenges, fines, or liability claims if a problematic tenant is inadvertently approved. Another consequence is the potential for vacancy periods. With a more rigorous application process, landlords may experience longer gaps between tenants, impacting cash flow and rental income stability. Properties in high-demand areas may still fill quickly, but in less competitive markets, landlords could find themselves weeks or months for suitable tenants. While these stricter background checks are intended to ensure tenant safety and fairness, they also limit landlord discretion and introduce new risks and responsibilities. The balance between tenant protection and landlord freedom is shifting, making property management more complex, costly, and time-intensive in 2026.
Number 2. Caps on rent increases reduce investment returns. Another major change affecting New Zealand landlords is the introduction of strict caps on rent increases. This law directly limits the amount and frequency that landlords can raise rent, fundamentally altering the economics of property investment and putting pressure on returns. Previously, landlords had the flexibility to adjust rent in response to market conditions, inflation, or rising maintenance costs. Now, these adjustments are regulated and often capped at a fixed percentage, regardless of how much costs have increased. This can make it difficult for property owners to keep up with rising mortgage rates, insurance premiums, or necessary repairs, squeezing profit margins significantly. The law also impacts strategic planning. Landlords who were counting on periodic rent increases to cover renovations or upgrades may now find that projected cash flows are no longer achievable. For multi-property owners, the cumulative effect can be substantial, potentially affecting long-term financial stability and investment viability. Additionally, these caps can create unintended consequences in the rental market. Some landlords may choose to exit the rental sector entirely, leading to fewer available properties and increased competition among tenants. Others might reduce investment in property improvements, as they can no longer pass costs on to tenants, which could impact the overall quality of housing stock. While the intention of these rent controls is to protect tenants and ensure affordability, they place significant constraints on landlords' financial flexibility and planning. Investors must now carefully consider their budgeting, property management, and long-term strategies, as rent increase caps will continue to influence the profitability of rental property ownership in 2026 and beyond.
Number 1. Mandatory registration of all rental properties. The first and perhaps most impactful change for landlords in New Zealand is the mandatory registration of all rental properties. Starting in 2026, every property being leased must be officially registered with the government, creating a new layer of oversight and administrative responsibility. This law aims to increase transparency, ensure tenant safety, and monitor compliance with housing standards, but it also places a significant burden on property owners. Landlords are now required to provide detailed information about their properties, including ownership details, property type, tenancy arrangements, and compliance with health and safety regulations. Failure to register a rental property can result in heavy fines, legal action, or restrictions on renting the property altogether, making this a critical step that cannot be ignored. This requirement also has broader implications for landlord accountability and government oversight. With every property on record, authorities can easily track compliance with other laws, such as rent caps, habitability standards, and tenancy termination rules. While this is designed to protect tenants, it reduces flexibility for landlords who may have previously managed their properties with minimal reporting or bureaucratic interference. Additionally, registration is not a one-time task. Landlords must update information regularly, especially if there are changes in tenancy, ownership, or property conditions. Missing updates can lead to penalties or disputes with tenants, further complicating property management. Overall, the mandatory registration law represents a fundamental shift in how landlords operate, making it essential for property owners to adapt their management practices. Compliance is no longer optional, and failing to register a property can have serious financial and legal consequences, marking this as the first critical hurdle for landlords navigating the 2026 regulatory landscape. In conclusion, the 2026 New Zealand landlord laws represent a major shift in property management, affecting everything from rent caps and tenant screening to mandatory property registration and compliance costs. For landlords, these changes mean increased responsibility, higher expenses, and stricter oversight, making it crucial to stay informed and adapt quickly. While the laws aim to protect tenants and improve housing standards, they also challenge traditional investment strategies and cash flow planning.
To safeguard your property and maximize returns, landlords must understand each regulation, implement best practices, and proactively manage their rentals in this evolving landscape.